Hello everyone, and welcome to our team presentation on urban farming and community gardening. Our team's members are Bella Silar, Malaysia Freeland, Tolu Delano, and myself, Srinivas Yalai. So for our 3 plots, we chose these 3 adjacent lots because we believe that these are the most ideal for crop cultivation. Firstly, these lots are vacant and in good condition, allowing for crop cultivation and proper crop harvest and gain. They are also affordable and comparatively cheap for the quality attained within the lots. Additionally, they are located within close proximity to the market at which we will be selling the surplus produce, if there is any, from these lots. These 3 lots are also very ideally situated because they are located near 2 churches, and this provides many beneficial aspects to these lot situations. First of all, there is a heavy pedestrian presence, as many will be attending gatherings and other services at the churches. This means that the lots will be used quite often and yield enough for consumption and even sale. Secondly, the large human presence means that, more than likely, many will witness these crops being cultivated. This would serve as a sense of motivation for them, leading to the activity being continued in other locations and other plots throughout Westside Atlanta. These plots also have ample water supply and sunlight, and the immediately adjacent church serves as a method of balancing out the amount of water and sunlight received. There is very little or small construction to the east of the lots, allowing for sunlight to be absorbed during the morning, during sunrise. During the evening, the church blocks most of the rays, leaving the crops time to grow more and absorb nutrients from the water. This balance is very important and permits the crops to grow properly and yield sufficient amounts of food and other harvests and other crops for the community.
While we cannot tell locals exactly what to plant in their gardens, it is important that we equip them with the information that allows them to produce the most efficient garden that produces the highest yield. They should keep in mind that they should plant crops that benefit each other when planted together. For example, when marigolds and tomato plants are planted together, the pungent smell of marigolds helps repel many of the pests that prey on tomatoes, such as hornworms, thrips, and whiteflies. It is also known that when marigolds are planted in between tomato crops, they actually stop the tomato crops from developing root knot. Another example of 2 plants that thrive when planted together are peppers and basil. Similar to marigolds, the pungent smell of basils help repel pests from peppers. It is also thought that when basils are planted next to pepper plants, they actually help improve the flavor of pepper plants. Diverging from the topic of plants to help repel pests from crops, another example of plants that benefit each other are corn and green beans. As green beans are a viney vegetable, they actually grow up corn stalks, thus eliminating the need for green bean trellises, which would just take up space in the garden. This maximizes space and produces more vegetables without as much land needing to be used. It is also noted that green bean produces excess nitrogen into the soil, which is needed for healthy corn growth. The garden layout should also be heavily considered so that the garden stays as sustainable and productive as possible. Leafy vegetables such as kale, spinach, and lettuce do not grow very well in sun. Rather than placing a tarp over the vegetables, a sort of trellis that forms a canopy over the vegetables can be made. Then, viney vegetables such as summer squash, tomatoes, and string beans can grow up the trellis, creating a natural source of shade for the leafy vegetables that grow on the ground beneath it. Another thing locals should consider when designing garden layout is that planting the same crops on the same plot of soil season after season depletes soil quality, and it can then lead to a decrease in quality in vegetables. Locals should consider crop rotation, which is the practice of varying the crops you plant on the same plot of soil, which will then vary the nutrients being taken and put back into the soil, leading to a maintained quality of soil. This can also stop the facilitation of different communities of pests and weeds becoming too strong and preying on certain vegetables.
There are many technologies that could help coordinate the process of development and maintenance of our community garden. One of these technologies would be radio frequency tracking devices, or RF devices. RF's implementation can be seen in Disneyland, where it is used in Disney's Fast Pass system, meaning that most of our employees would be familiar with this type of technology. Our group's implementation of this technology will be to track which section of the garden is receiving the most attention. The garden would be split up in different sections, demarcated by RF-enabled poles. Every time an employee would care for a section, they would have to tap their RF-enabled bracelet to a certain pole. When the pole is tapped, an LED light would flash on the pole, signifying that this current section of the garden was being attended to. To signal that an employee was finished with a certain section of the garden, the employee would just have to tap their RF bracelet to a pole, shutting off the LED light. Software would also be used in tandem with the RF technology to provide all employees a comprehensive log of how any certain section of the garden is being taken care of. One possible thing that could undermine the use of this technology would be a lack of training in the RF technology. The technology would not be effective at monitoring the attention each employee is paying to each section of the garden if said employee forgot to tap their RF bracelets to a certain pole. The utilization of this technology requires coordination with all employees. However, I personally don't believe that any errors will occur with this technology due to how intuitive the design of our garden monitoring system is. The problem of coordination could also be solved without modern technology through the use of a clipboard system, where each employee would have to sign in with what section of the garden they worked on. But while this system is less complicated and probably cheaper, it is also less precise in identifying the amount of time spent on each section of the garden. Another modern technology that could greatly improve the success of our garden would be the incorporation of sensors to monitor the health and well-being of our produce. We could add humidity sensors that would send notifications to an employee if a certain section of the garden is receiving too much or not enough water. Heat and sunlight sensors could also do the same thing, except with sunlight, so sun-sensitive produce like kale, spinach, and lettuce do not wilt. All this information will be represented graphically and in spreadsheet format in a software that would be readily accessible through almost any smartphone. This technology will ensure that all produce donated and sold would be in peak condition. The problem of monitoring the health of all our produce can very well be solved without modern technology. However, that would require hiring employees with more gardening experience. Given the fact that our garden seeks to employ individuals from the Atlanta area, it'd be beneficial to reduce the amount of prior gardening experience needed. The introduction of produce monitoring sensors would help all employees ultimately produce vegetables of higher quality.
We understand that we will most likely have a surplus of produce from our community garden. We also understand that Atlanta has thousands of people who suffer every day from homelessness and food insecurity. With our surplus, we plan on donating half of it to the Atlanta Community Food Bank, which distributes over 60 million pounds of donated grocery products each year to more than 60 agencies. We also plan on donating any of the food that the food banks cannot accept to retirement homes or local fire stations, and we will be sure to notify these local food banks, retirement homes, and fire stations of any pesticides, herbicides, or any non-organic ways that we grow our produce. The other half of the produce that we will not be donating will be sold at the Fresh Marta Market at the West End Station. We chose this location in particular because it caters to a broad demographic of people who are mostly college students and people on the go. when we understand that in Atlanta there isn't a lot of access to fresh produce, and college students specifically they have very limited access to fresh produce on college campuses.